After my colleague's presentation, I start to feel like maybe there's some important information I'm missing in my presentation. But I told myself like, all right, no perfect presentation. That's why we write the papers. So yes, thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Biao He, and I'm a PhD student and junior researcher with ECePS. Where I should start? 5 years ago, in 2020 and 2021, I was actually trained as a social policy researcher, particularly focusing on disability policy. Not like now, like a political scientist or something. So back then, one of my research tasks was to identify what kind of policies that China has adopted to promote digital inclusion for persons with disabilities and Asian groups. So I kind of started this research task. I'm sorry, yeah? I can't go back. Okay, anyway. So I start to review all the policy measures, legislation foundations in China, which aimed to promote digital inclusion for persons with disabilities, and focusing on redistributive policies and regulative policies. So I found that China has actually adopted a rather comprehensive and thick policy foundation and the legislation framework to foster digital inclusion. So just some examples about the research results. For example, in terms of redistributive measures, persons with disabilities in China can get free ICT devices. Or if they want to buy more expensive ICT devices, they can get subsidy or allowance from the government. Regulative measures, here's one of the results I want to highlight. The Chinese government has regulated all the levels of governments to provide accessible, usable government websites which are compliant with accessibility technical standards and guidelines. So all of the research design and findings were included in my first ever journal paper, Digital Inclusion for Persons with Disabilities in China under COVID-19. And if you're interested, you can have a look later on. So moving to 2021, September, I officially start my PhD journey with ECePS. And I started to narrow down my research focus from very broad general digital inclusion to the implementation of accessibility guidelines, more specifically how Chinese governments, especially local governments, provide accessible, usable, standard compliant government websites. And so before I move on, I just simply introduce what is web accessibility, what is web accessibility standards and guidelines. So web accessibility means that we design websites or other, for example, mobile applications, so that according to, for example, accessibility guidelines, WCAG 1.0, 2.0, so that persons with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the contents on websites and the mobile applications. So in many countries in China or in Europe, the authorities started this kind of policy initiative from public sectors. So if you go, for example, to the government website of Tartu or Tallinn, you can actually see there's an accessibility toolbar where you can adjust the text size or you can adjust the contrast or something like that. This is one of the ways to improve the accessibility of the government websites. So more comprehensively, there's another way, which is that you have to modify the codes behind the websites according to WCAG 1.0, 2.0, etc., etc. So why? Because the persons with disabilities, sometimes they cannot use the toolbar. They have to use the assistive tools like external keyboards or mouse or screen reader. So you have to make sure that the codes behind your government websites are compliant with the technical guidelines and the standards so that they can use the external assistive tools properly. So I have introduced that China has adopted lots of policy measures. But now, what about implementation? How has the local government, municipality, implemented this kind of policy and legislation foundations that aims to provide accessible, usable, standard-compliant government websites? So between 2021 and 2023, I wrote my second publication, which was published in 2024. So in this book chapter, I investigated how Chinese municipalities translated and implemented the top-down policy mandates on delivering accessible, usable, standard-compliant government websites. So focused on the case of Wuhan and Shenzhen. So the results first show that after reviewing the relevant policy measures, I found that there are kind of reservations in local policy translation between Shenzhen and Wuhan. For example, Shenzhen, as one of the richest Chinese municipality, they're always active and responsive to follow up the national and provincial policy measures regarding web accessibility and digital inclusion. And they're also very proactive to, for example, create or develop local regulations to push the government sectors to provide accessible and usable government websites and maintain the accessibility of their websites, which is missing in Wuhan. So this is the first part of their findings. And also, the second part of the finding is that because of the different local policy translation, they have different implementation outcome as well. I actually conducted a kind of accessibility evaluation using software ECePS. I don't know if you have heard of it, to evaluate the accessibility of selected government websites in Wuhan and Shenzhen. And in general, I found government websites or public websites in Shenzhen are more accessible than those in Wuhan. So why so? Why? Regional difference happens. Why some municipalities have done better than others in terms of providing accessible and usable government websites and e-services delivery. So that becomes the core question for my PhD journey. So to answer this core question, with my supervisor's help, I actually have developed a kind of three-step research plan. First one is a single case study where we basically explore relevant factors and variables related to the implementation of accessibility guidelines in Chinese municipalities. And second one is that we aim to conduct comparative case study, so we can identify key factors, variables, conditions that can explain the regional variations in the implementation of accessibility guidelines. And the third one, we aim to end up the projects by a quantitative comparative analysis, where we can identify what conditions are necessary or sufficient if we consider a successful implementation of accessibility guidelines in Chinese municipalities. So to answer this question, and I conducted several months of fieldwork in China in 2023. I visited the 4 Chinese municipalities, more than 20 visits in total, because sometimes you may end up like the interviewees just refuse to have a conversation with you in very short notice, even though you are in the city already. Or sometimes you realize that some key questions are not covered during last interview, so you have to come back and forth to have some follow-up conversations. So as a result, I got 20 interviews and focus group conversations with both government sectors and NGOs in 4 Chinese municipalities. And also, I also attended a couple of academic events. I also invited to some of, for example, government-led seminars, organizations as accessibility experts, even though I don't think I am. So with this data, I start to answer the third research question: how Chinese municipality has or has not implemented to provide accessible, usable, especially standard compliant government websites. So we selected a municipality, a capital municipality in a province in East China, to explore drivers related to institutional pressures, organizational capacity, and personal intention engagement. And this paper, the third paper, oh, sorry. The third paper just has been accepted, and so hopefully will be published online very soon. So if you're interested, you can have a look later on too. So results: coercive pressure, which is from, for example, enforcement measures like performance evaluation and the benchmarks, ranking between different, public agencies, incentivize the local responsible agencies and officials to start the implementation of accessibility government. And to start the implementation of accessibility guidelines. But we found that actually they didn't just meet the targets set by the policy mandates. They actually went beyond. Actually, they outperformed the implementation of accessibility. So why? We found that both local governments and frontline officials were facing coercive pressure. So for local governments, because they have to be response to the coercive pressure, so they have to set up a leading agency. They have to provide necessary resources to enhance their organizational capacity during the implementation. And for the frontline officials, they have to, because of the coercive pressure, so they have to learn experiences from neighboring municipalities or brother agencies, so that they can get experiences from best practice cases, which led to outperformance at the end. So in a summary, coercive pressure actually drives the local governments, local agencies, and officials to meet the targets during the implementation of accessibility guidelines. And this coercive pressure also influenced the organizational capacity and individual engagement and intention, which additionally explain the outperformance as a result. But the follow-up question is, why some municipalities have done better than others? So that's why we, to answer this question, that's why we adopted the most similar system design approach to select 2 Chinese municipalities. Again, Wuhan and Shenzhen, because I have some local network there, focusing on how differently the municipalities observe and interpret the institution pressure and develop their organizational capacity and interact with the local civil society. And the results have been reported in our 4th paper, which has been submitted to local government studies and under review at this moment. Very briefly, yes, I have enough time. As the institutional pressure level, we found that the local governments actually translates and interprets the national and the provincial mandates in different ways. So actually they have different responses to understand the coercive pressure. For example, like Shenzhen, they have their municipal policy mandates where they identify the very crucial policy components. For example, performance evaluation and benchmarks as enforcement measures. Also, they clearly define the accountability, who should do what, but which is missing in the Wuhan case. But also Shenzhen, actually they have a very engaging leading agency, which plays a very important role in, for example, mobilizing the participation and gathering resources for local agencies, providing guidance and control the process and the outcome of the process of the implementation, which is missing in Wuhan too. And Shenzhen, the most surprising funny for us is that Shenzhen has a very active local civil society with lots of disabled persons organizations, NGOs, and interest groups, which has been very active to advocate accessibility and technologies and policies. So actually, which has helped raise the public awareness, not only for the people, but also for the citizens, but also for the government sectors. So that's why the local agencies in Shenzhen have been very aware of providing accessible, usable government websites for citizens. At the same time, we also noticed that in Shenzhen, interest groups and for example, NGOs, they have conducted independent assessments on the government performance. Also, and this is kind of independent assessment has included evaluation on the accessibility of government websites too. So that's why local civil society has a say on the local government's performance, which kind of push the local governments to provide accessible and usable government websites. I will skip this one. This is still underwriting, end of my research projects. Very briefly, many years ago, I thought my research project is a little bit off topic from my research team, but now I'm more confident about what I'm doing. It doesn't matter, cross-border governance. It doesn't matter e-voting. It doesn't matter cybersecurity. Everything is about implementation of e-government initiatives. So my research can contribute to, enrich your understanding of the process mechanisms of e-government initiatives, but probably with a very specific and unique cases that is related to accessibility guidelines implementation. Second, I think my research can contribute to understanding of how policy implementation happens in China, including e-government policies. For example, here, there's lots of debates on how e-government policy happens in China. For example, some people say, okay, because this is an authoritarian country, so local governments have to listen to the higher level authorities, etc., etc. But some scholars say, no, we actually observe that local governments are more interested in local issues, more interested in the actual needs from the citizens. So there's still ongoing debates. My research actually says both sides are still working at this moment during the policy implementation, not only in China, but maybe also in other contexts too. Final sentence, yes. And sometimes I'm a dreamer. I thought that if I cannot change the world, what's the meaning of being a researcher? But now I'm more realistic. But still, I want to say, hopefully my research can kind of provoke a call for policy and social attention to the actual user needs in adopting e-government applications and e-services, because we always assume that this can be usable for everyone. But actually, do you have data? Do you have information from vulnerable groups? Maybe no. So when we move in so fast and develop lots of e-government applications, we have to think if our strategies are inclusive and sustainable. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much for asking attention for yet another concern. There is still room for 1 or 2 short questions. Who may I give the floor?
I have. No, I have a question. So, what would you say is something that you would highlight about how China is implementing accessibility policies that would be? I mean, you presented your whole research, but maybe in just in a quick way, what is something special or something interesting that you would like to share that you have observed and how these accessibility policies are implemented, that it would be interesting to also disseminate in other contexts as well? Thank you.
And then in 1 sentence, please. Thank you.
I think it's about how the local government interprets the top-down policy mandates, because that will really impact how the reformulate the local policy implementation guidelines, and also half sentence. And also, we have to listen to the user groups for more voices, because when we design this kind of government websites, we always assume that this can be usable, or maybe persons with the disabilities don't use this, don't use that, but we don't know. So that's why we have to have a contact with the actual user groups to give more opportunities for them to spread for their voices. Yeah.
Okay, with an eye on the time, I would like to thank you again for your presentation.